Imagine a king so powerful, so grand, that his very presence made the people tremble. This was Gilgamesh, ruler of Uruk, a city of towering walls and bustling streets. He was 2/3 god and 1/3 human, a mix that gave him immense strength and a spirit that knew no equal. His body was perfect, his mind sharp, and his will unbending. He built the great city of Uruk with his own hands, or so the story said, raising its mighty walls, stone by stone, brick by brick, until they touched the clouds. The city was a wonder to behold, a place of grand temples and busy markets, a jewel in the ancient land. But for all his strength and his grand achievements, Gilgamesh was a king who ruled with a heavy hand. His power was absolute, and he used it as he pleased, without thought for his people's feelings or their peace. He took what he wanted when he wanted it. If a man built a fine house, Gilgamesh might claim it. If a woman was beautiful, he might take her as his own. He challenged the young men to contests of strength and skill, always winning, always proving his unmatched power. The people of Uruk lived in fear, their lives not truly their own. They toiled for the king, building his city, fighting his wars, and always living under his shadow. There was no rest, no true joy, for the shadow of Gilgamesh loomed over every home, every family. The women wept in their homes, and the men grumbled in hushed tones, but no one dared to speak out loud. Who could stand against Gilgamesh? He was stronger than any man, faster than any warrior, and his heart seemed to be made of stone. He was a king, yes, but he was also a burden, a heavy weight on the shoulders of his people. The elders of Uruk sat in their council, their faces lined with worry, their voices low. They spoke of the king's endless energy, his restless spirit that drove him to constantly seek new challenges, new ways to show his power. He never slept, they said, or if he did, it was only for a short time before he rose again, ready to command, ready to conquer. The people, with nowhere else to turn, began to pray. They lifted their voices to the heavens, to the great gods who watched over their world. They prayed to Anu, the god of the sky, and to Enlil, the god of the wind and storms. They begged for relief, for someone, anyone, to bring peace to Uruk. "O mighty gods," they cried, "Gilgamesh is too strong for us. He leaves no son to his father, no maiden to her mother. He takes everything, and we have nothing left. Create someone who can stand against him, someone who can challenge his power, someone who can bring peace to our city." Their pleas rose like smoke to the heavens, reaching the ears of the powerful gods. The gods listened. They heard the cries of the people of Uruk, their sorrow and their fear. They saw the suffering caused by the mighty king Gilgamesh. And so the great goddess Aruru, who shaped all living things, heard their prayers. She was the goddess of creation, and she knew how to balance power. She dipped her hands into the sacred waters, washing them clean, and then she pinched off a piece of clay from the earth. With careful hands, she shaped the clay, molding it with the image of Anu in her mind, creating a being that would be a match for Gilgamesh. She made him strong, just like Gilgamesh, but she made him wild too, a creature of nature, untouched by human ways. This new being was named Enkidu. He was born in the wilderness, far from the city walls of Uruk. His body was covered in thick hair like a wild beast, and his long hair flowed like a field of grain. He lived among the animals, eating grass with the gazelles, drinking water from the same pools as the wild beasts, and running free with the herds. He knew nothing of human clothes, human food, or human laws. He was pure nature, a true child of the plains, living in harmony with the creatures of the wild. He was strong and innocent, his heart as open as the vast sky above him. The animals were his friends, and he protected them, breaking the traps set by hunters and filling in the pits they dug. One day, a hunter came to the watering hole, hoping to catch some game. He saw Enkidu there, drinking with the animals, and his heart filled with fear. Never had he seen such a creature, half man, half beast, yet moving with the grace and power of the wild. The hunter watched as Enkidu freed his trapped animals, ruining his hunt day after day. The hunter was afraid to approach this wild man, but he also knew he could not continue his livelihood with Enkidu protecting the beasts. He returned home, his face pale with worry, his hands trembling. He told his father about the strange, powerful being he had seen, a man of the wild, stronger than any human, who lived among the animals and protected them. The hunter's father was a wise man. He listened carefully to his son's tale and then spoke. "My son," he said, "this is a matter for Gilgamesh. Only he, the mighty king, has the strength and cunning to deal with such a creature. Go to Uruk, to Gilgamesh. Tell him what you have seen. He will know what to do. He will send someone to tame this wild man, to bring him into the world of humans. And then, perhaps, this wild man will be a match for Gilgamesh himself." So the hunter, filled with a new kind of fear and a sliver of hope, set off for Uruk, the great city. He walked for many days, his mind filled with images of the wild man and the powerful king. When the hunter arrived in Uruk, he went straight to the palace of Gilgamesh. He bowed low before the king and told him everything he had seen, the hairy man, his life among the animals, his strength, and how he foiled all the hunter's traps. Gilgamesh listened with interest, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. He was always looking for a challenge, a new way to test his might. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Do not fear, hunter," Gilgamesh said. "I know exactly what to do. There is a woman in Uruk, a temple prostitute named Shamhat. She is beautiful and wise, and she knows the ways of humans. Go, take her with you to the watering hole. Let her meet this wild man. She will teach him. She will show him what it means to be human. She will draw him away from the wild, and then perhaps he will come to Uruk, and I will meet him." So the hunter returned to the wilderness, taking Shamhat with him. She was a woman of great beauty and gentle spirit, chosen for this important task. They waited by the watering hole for 3 days, hidden among the reeds, until Enkidu appeared with his animal friends. Shamhat stepped out from her hiding place, revealing herself to the wild man. Enkidu, who had never seen a human woman before, was drawn to her beauty. He looked at her with innocent wonder, his wild eyes wide. Shamhat, with her gentle voice and kind eyes, began to speak to him, teaching him the first lessons of humanity. She spoke of the world of humans, of their ways, their food, their clothes, their songs. For 6 days and 7 nights, Shamhat stayed with Enkidu. She taught him to eat human food instead of grass, offering him bread and beer, things he had never tasted before. At first he was hesitant, but soon he found the taste pleasing. She taught him to drink beer, and it warmed him in a new way, making him feel happy and light. She showed him how to wear clothes, how to cover his wild body, and how to stand tall like a man. As he learned these things, his wildness began to fade. The hair on his body became less coarse, and his mind, once focused only on the ways of animals, began to open to human thought. He felt a change within him, a softening, a new understanding of the world. As Enkidu became more human, the animals, his former companions, began to shy away from him. They no longer recognized him as one of their own. When he tried to run with the gazelles, they fled from him. When he approached the wild beasts, they kept their distance. Enkidu felt a pang of sadness, a sense of loss, but also a new feeling, a longing for something more. Shamhat saw the change in him, the growing awareness in his eyes. She told him about Uruk, the great city, and about Gilgamesh, the mighty king. She spoke of the grand walls, the bustling streets, the music and the laughter. She told him that in Uruk he would find a true friend, someone who was his equal, someone who could understand him. Enkidu listened intently. The idea of a city, of other humans, of a friend, was new and exciting. He felt a pull towards this unknown world. He asked Shamhat about Gilgamesh, and she described the king's immense strength and his restless spirit. She told him that Gilgamesh was a man of great power, but also a man who needed a companion, someone to share his adventures, someone to challenge him. Enkidu felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. He had heard of Gilgamesh's tyranny, but he also felt a deep urge to meet this powerful king, to test his own strength against him. He was ready to leave the wilderness, ready to embrace his new human self. Shamhat and Enkidu then began their journey to Uruk. On their way, they stopped at a shepherd's camp. Enkidu, seeing humans at work, learned more about their ways. He helped the shepherds, protecting their flocks from wolves and lions, showing his immense strength and his new understanding of human needs. The shepherds were amazed by his power and his kindness. They offered him food and drink, and he ate and drank with them, sharing stories and laughter. He was learning to be part of a community, to share, to protect, to belong. He was no longer just a wild man. He was becoming a true human, ready for the world of Uruk. As they drew closer to Uruk, the city's towering walls rose majestically against the sky. Enkidu gazed at them with awe, a sense of wonder filling his heart. He saw the people moving about, busy and purposeful, and he felt a growing excitement. Shamhat told him about a great celebration happening in the city, a wedding feast. She explained that Gilgamesh, as king, had the right to be the first to enter the bridal chamber, a custom that was part of his oppressive rule. Enkidu felt a surge of anger. This was the tyranny the people had spoken of, the injustice that needed to be stopped. His wild, innocent heart, now touched by human understanding, could not accept such unfairness. Enkidu walked through the streets of Uruk, his powerful presence drawing all eyes. The people whispered, wondering who this strange, strong man could be. He saw the preparations for the wedding, the bride, the groom, and the path leading to the bridal chamber, where Gilgamesh was expected to enter first. A great crowd had gathered, eager to see the king. Enkidu, his heart burning with a new sense of justice, stood in the path, blocking the way. He would not let Gilgamesh pass. He would stand up for the people, for the innocent. He would challenge the king's unjust rule. Then Gilgamesh appeared. He walked with the confidence of a king, his head held high, his eyes surveying the crowd. He saw Enkidu standing in his path, a powerful, hairy man, unlike anyone he had ever seen. Gilgamesh stopped, a curious look on his face. He was used to people bowing before him, stepping aside. But this man stood firm, his eyes meeting Gilgamesh's with an equal challenge. A thrill ran through Gilgamesh. Finally, a worthy opponent, someone who did not fear him, someone who dared to stand in his way. This was the challenge he had been waiting for, the test of strength he had longed for. Without a word, Gilgamesh charged forward, ready to assert his dominance. Enkidu met him, his own powerful body tensing for the fight. The two giants clashed in the middle of the street, their bodies slamming together with the force of thunder. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The people of Uruk watched in stunned silence, their hearts pounding. Never had they seen such a battle. Two beings of immense strength, locked in a struggle that shook the very foundations of the city. They wrestled, grappling with each other, their muscles straining, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They were perfectly matched, two forces of nature colliding. Gilgamesh tried to throw Enkidu, but Enkidu held firm, his feet rooted to the ground. Enkidu tried to push Gilgamesh back, but the king was unyielding. They spun and twisted, each trying to gain an advantage, each pushing the other to their limits. The dust rose around them, swirling like a storm. The sound of their grunts and the impact of their bodies echoed through the city. Neither one gave an inch. Gilgamesh used all his strength, his divine power surging through him. But Enkidu, the wild man, met him blow for blow, his raw, untamed power, a perfect match for the king's might. It was a battle of equals, a dance of power, and it seemed as though it would never end. Finally, Gilgamesh, with a mighty roar, managed to throw Enkidu to the ground. But even as Enkidu fell, he kicked out, tripping Gilgamesh, and the king stumbled. They both rose quickly, their chests heaving, their eyes locked. There was no anger in their gaze now, only a deep respect. Gilgamesh looked at Enkidu, truly seeing him for the first time. He saw not just a powerful opponent, but a being who could stand with him, who could match his strength, who was not afraid. And Enkidu looked at Gilgamesh, seeing not just a tyrannical king, but a mighty warrior, a force of nature, someone who understood the thrill of a true challenge. A strange thing happened then. Instead of continuing the fight, Gilgamesh reached out a hand, not in anger, but in a gesture of respect. Enkidu took his hand, and in that moment, something shifted. The fierce battle had not ended in defeat for either, but in a profound understanding. They had tested each other, pushed each other to their limits, and found a kindred spirit. The king who had known no equal, and the wild man who had known no human, now stood side by side. The people of Uruk watched in amazement as their mighty king, who had always been alone in his power, found a friend. From that day forward, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were inseparable. They walked through the streets of Uruk together, their presence commanding respect and awe. Gilgamesh, who had once been restless and oppressive, found a new purpose. Enkidu's presence softened him, guiding his immense energy towards more noble pursuits. He no longer terrorized his people. Instead, he began to use his strength to protect them, to lead them, to build a better Uruk. Enkidu, with his pure heart and wild wisdom, became Gilgamesh's conscience, his guide, and his most trusted companion. Their friendship was unlike any other, a bond forged in battle and strengthened by mutual respect. The people of Uruk rejoiced. Their king was still mighty, still powerful, but now he was also just. He listened to Enkidu, and Enkidu's presence brought a balance to Gilgamesh's immense power. The city of Uruk, with its grand walls, became a place of peace and prosperity. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the king and the wild man, were a team, a force for good. They shared meals, they shared stories, and they shared dreams. Gilgamesh learned from Enkidu the beauty of the natural world, and Enkidu learned from Gilgamesh the complexities and wonders of human civilization. Their bond was a testament to the power of true friendship, a connection that transcended their different beginnings. This friendship, however, was not just for the quiet moments within the city walls. Gilgamesh, with his restless spirit, still craved adventure, but now he had a companion to share it with, someone who could stand by his side against any foe. He spoke of great deeds, of journeys to distant lands, of monsters to be faced. Enkidu, ever loyal, was ready to follow. Their friendship would soon lead them on an adventure far greater and far more dangerous than either could imagine. Their names would become legendary, their deeds whispered through the ages. But first, they would have to face the terrors of the world beyond Uruk, proving their strength and their bond against forces far greater than themselves. The stage was set for epic tales, for triumphs and tragedies, all beginning with the unlikely friendship between a powerful king and a wild, innocent man. Their story was just beginning, and the world waited to see what these two mighty heroes would do next. The very air around them seemed to hum with the promise of adventure, a promise they were both eager to fulfill. Hand in hand, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the king and the wild man, embarked on a series of daring quests. No longer was Gilgamesh a tyrant. Now he was a hero, with his loyal companion by his side. Their friendship had changed Gilgamesh, turning his restless energy towards great deeds instead of selfish ones. He still craved glory, but now he wanted to share it, to prove their combined strength to the world. And Enkidu, who had once roamed the wild alone, now found purpose and joy in their shared adventures. The people of Uruk watched them go, no longer with fear, but with pride and hope. Enkidu, who knew the wilderness better than any man, felt a chill of fear. He had heard tales of Humbaba, and he knew the monster's power. He tried to warn Gilgamesh, speaking of the dangers, the impossibility of the task. "My friend," Enkidu said, "I have seen the cedar forest. I have walked its paths. Humbaba is a creature of terror, a guardian of the gods. His teeth are dragon's teeth, his face is a snarling lion's, and his strength is beyond measure. No mortal can defeat him. Let us not seek this fight, for it will surely lead to our doom." Gilgamesh spoke of a great forest, far to the east, known as the Cedar Forest. It was a sacred place, guarded by a fearsome monster named Humbaba, whose roar was a flood, whose breath was fire, and whose jaws were death. No human dared to enter this forest, for Humbaba was placed there by the great god Enlil to protect the cedars. But Gilgamesh, ever bold, declared that they would go there, defeat Humbaba, and cut down the mighty cedars. This would bring them everlasting fame, a name that would echo through time, a glory that would never fade. The two friends set out, leaving the great walls of Uruk behind them. They walked for many days and nights, through deserts and over mountains. Gilgamesh, though a king, endured the hardships of the journey with strength. Enkidu, accustomed to the wild, guided him, finding water and shelter, teaching Gilgamesh the ways of survival in the harsh lands. They encouraged each other, their friendship growing stronger with every step. Gilgamesh would tell Enkidu stories of Uruk, and Enkidu would share tales of the animals and the secrets of the wilderness. But Gilgamesh, whose heart was set on glory, would not be swayed. He laughed at Enkidu's fear, though he loved his friend for his honesty. "My friend," Gilgamesh replied, "do not speak of death. All men must die, whether they live a long life in safety or fall in a glorious battle. If I am to die, let it be in a fight that brings honor to my name, a deed that will be remembered forever. We will go to the cedar forest, we will face Humbaba, and we will defeat him. Together, we are stronger than any monster." Gilgamesh prepared for the journey. He gathered his finest weapons, his sharpest axes, and his strongest armor. The elders of Uruk, though fearful for their king, gave their blessings and offered advice. They knew Gilgamesh's stubborn heart. They entrusted Enkidu with the task of protecting Gilgamesh, for Enkidu was wise in the ways of the wild, and Gilgamesh, for all his strength, sometimes lacked caution. "Enkidu," they pleaded, "you are strong, you are wise. Protect our king, guide him on this dangerous path, bring him back to us safely." Enkidu promised he would, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. As they journeyed, Gilgamesh would have powerful dreams each night. He would wake in a fright, his heart pounding, and describe his visions to Enkidu. In one dream, a mountain fell on them, crushing them both. Enkidu, wise in interpreting dreams, would calm his friend, explaining that the mountain was Humbaba, and their victory was assured. In another dream, a great storm raged, and a fiery monster attacked them. Enkidu would again reassure Gilgamesh, saying it was a sign of their triumph, that the god Shamash, the sun god, was watching over them and would help them. Finally, after many days of travel, they reached the edge of the cedar forest. The air grew heavy, filled with the scent of ancient trees and a strange, unsettling quiet. The trees were immense, reaching to the sky, their branches intertwined like giant arms. A path, dark and narrow, led into the heart of the forest. This was Humbaba's domain, a place of deep shadows and unseen dangers. A sense of dread hung in the air, a warning to all who dared to enter. Even Gilgamesh felt a shiver of unease, but his resolve remained firm. They stepped into the forest, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and their own footsteps. They walked deeper and deeper, the trees growing thicker, the light fading. Then they heard it, a distant roar like a storm approaching, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. It was Humbaba. The sound filled them with terror, but they pressed on, their hands gripping their weapons. They knew they were close, that the battle they had sought was now upon them. The air grew hotter, a strange, unnatural heat, as if a great fire burned nearby. Suddenly, Humbaba appeared. He was a monstrous figure, huge and terrifying, with a face like a snarling lion and eyes that glowed with malevolent fire. His body was covered in scales, and his roar was deafening. He saw the two intruders, tiny figures in his vast domain, and his fury erupted. He charged at them, a living storm of destruction. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood their ground, their hearts pounding, but their courage held. This was the monster they had come to face, and they would not back down. The battle began. Humbaba attacked first, swinging his massive arms, tearing at the trees around them. Gilgamesh, with his great axe, struck at the monster, but Humbaba's skin was like armor, deflecting the blows. Enkidu, quick and agile, darted around, trying to find a weakness. Humbaba's roars echoed through the forest, a sound of pure terror. Gilgamesh felt his strength beginning to wane, a cold fear creeping into his heart. He looked at Enkidu, and for a moment he thought they might truly fail. Seeing Gilgamesh hesitate, Enkidu cried out, "Do not fear, my friend. Remember your dreams. Remember the strength of Shamash. We are here, and we will not turn back. Strike him, Gilgamesh. Strike him down." Enkidu's words filled Gilgamesh with new courage. He remembered his dreams, the promise of victory. He remembered the god Shamash, who had promised to help them. He raised his axe high, calling upon the power of the sun god. At that moment, the great god Shamash, seeing their struggle from the heavens, sent mighty winds to aid Gilgamesh and Enkidu. 8 fierce winds swept into the cedar forest, swirling around Humbaba, trapping him, blinding him, making him stumble. Humbaba roared in frustration, unable to fight against the unseen forces. This was their chance. Gilgamesh, empowered by Shamash, struck with all his might, his axe biting deep into Humbaba's neck. Enkidu, seeing the monster weakened, joined the attack, striking at Humbaba's legs, bringing the giant to his knees. Humbaba fell, a colossal crash that shook the entire forest. He lay defeated, his monstrous body still. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood over him, panting, their bodies aching, but their hearts filled with triumph. They had done it. They had defeated the fearsome guardian of the cedar forest. Humbaba, in his dying moments, begged for mercy, promising to serve Gilgamesh, to be his slave. Enkidu, remembering Humbaba's cruelty, urged Gilgamesh not to listen, not to show mercy to such a creature. Gilgamesh, after a moment of hesitation, listened to his friend. With a final, powerful blow, they ended Humbaba's life. They then began to cut down the mighty cedar trees, fulfilling their goal. The sound of their axes echoed through the now silent forest. They chose the finest cedars, preparing them to be floated down the river back to Uruk. They had achieved great glory, a feat no other mortal had dared, but their victory came at a cost. The great god Enlil, who had placed Humbaba as guardian, was furious. He saw their act as a great disrespect, a challenge to his authority. He cursed them, promising that their triumph would bring them sorrow and pain. It was then that the goddess Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, saw Gilgamesh. She was captivated by his beauty, his strength, and his recent triumph. She desired him, wanting him to be her husband. She came to him, her voice sweet, her eyes shining with desire. "Come, Gilgamesh," she said, "be my husband. I will give you riches beyond measure, chariots of lapis lazuli and gold, drawn by mighty lions. You will be a king among kings, and your fame will spread throughout the lands. I will be your queen, and you will be my beloved." But Gilgamesh, filled with his own pride and perhaps a touch of arrogance, scorned her offer. He remembered the fate of Ishtar's previous lovers, how she had used them and then abandoned them, turning them into animals or monsters. He listed them, one by one, reminding her of her cruel past. "What would I gain from being your husband?" Gilgamesh asked, his voice sharp. "You are like a flimsy door that keeps out neither wind nor storm. You are like a shoe that bites its owner's foot. You have loved Tammuz, and you condemned him to the underworld. You loved the shepherd, and you turned him into a wolf. You loved the gardener, and you turned him into a bird. No, Ishtar, I will not be your husband. I know your ways." After their great victory, Gilgamesh and Enkidu returned to Uruk, bringing with them the magnificent cedar trees and the head of Humbaba as proof of their triumph. The people of Uruk cheered, celebrating their heroes. Gilgamesh, now truly a beloved king, was filled with pride. He washed himself, put on his finest clothes, and adorned himself with his royal crown. He was a king worthy of admiration, a hero of legend. Hand in hand, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the king and the wild man, embarked on a series of daring quests. No longer was Gilgamesh a tyrant. Now he was a hero, with his loyal companion by his side. Their friendship had changed Gilgamesh, turning his restless energy towards great deeds instead of selfish ones. He still craved glory, but now he wanted to share it, to prove their combined strength to the world. And Enkidu, who had once roamed the wild alone, now found purpose and joy in their shared adventures. The people of Uruk watched them go, no longer with fear, but with pride and hope. Gilgamesh spoke of a great forest, far to the east, known as the Cedar Forest. It was a sacred place, guarded by a fearsome monster named Humbaba, whose roar was a flood, whose breath was fire, and whose jaws were death. No human dared to enter this forest, for Humbaba was placed there by the great god Enlil to protect the cedars. But Gilgamesh, ever bold, declared that they would go there, defeat Humbaba, and cut down the mighty cedars. This would bring them everlasting fame, a name that would echo through time, a glory that would never fade. Enkidu, who knew the wilderness better than any man, felt a chill of fear. He had heard tales of Humbaba, and he knew the monster's power. He tried to warn Gilgamesh, speaking of the dangers, the impossibility of the task. "My friend," Enkidu said, "I have seen the cedar forest. I have walked its paths. Humbaba is a creature of terror, a guardian of the gods. His teeth are dragon's teeth, his face is a snarling lion's, and his strength is beyond measure. No mortal can defeat him. Let us not seek this fight, for it will surely lead to our doom." But Gilgamesh, whose heart was set on glory, would not be swayed. He laughed at Enkidu's fear, though he loved his friend for his honesty. "My friend," Gilgamesh replied, "do not speak of death. All men must die, whether they live a long life in safety or fall in a glorious battle. If I am to die, let it be in a fight that brings honor to my name, a deed that will be remembered forever. We will go to the cedar forest, we will face Humbaba, and we will defeat him. Together, we are stronger than any monster." Gilgamesh prepared for the journey. He gathered his finest weapons, his sharpest axes, and his strongest armor. The elders of Uruk, though fearful for their king, gave their blessings and offered advice. They knew Gilgamesh's stubborn heart. They entrusted Enkidu with the task of protecting Gilgamesh, for Enkidu was wise in the ways of the wild, and Gilgamesh, for all his strength, sometimes lacked caution. "Enkidu," they pleaded, "you are strong, you are wise. Protect our king, guide him on this dangerous path, bring him back to us safely." Enkidu promised he would, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. The two friends set out, leaving the great walls of Uruk behind them. They walked for many days and nights, through deserts and over mountains. Gilgamesh, though a king, endured the hardships of the journey with strength. Enkidu, accustomed to the wild, guided him, finding water and shelter, teaching Gilgamesh the ways of survival in the harsh lands. They encouraged each other, their friendship growing stronger with every step. Gilgamesh would tell Enkidu stories of Uruk, and Enkidu would share tales of the animals and the secrets of the wilderness. As they journeyed, Gilgamesh would have powerful dreams each night. He would wake in a fright, his heart pounding, and describe his visions to Enkidu. In one dream, a mountain fell on them, crushing them both. Enkidu, wise in interpreting dreams, would calm his friend, explaining that the mountain was Humbaba, and their victory was assured. In another dream, a great storm raged, and a fiery monster attacked them. Enkidu would again reassure Gilgamesh, saying it was a sign of their triumph, that the god Shamash, the sun god, was watching over them and would help them. Finally, after many days of travel, they reached the edge of the cedar forest. The air grew heavy, filled with the scent of ancient trees and a strange, unsettling quiet. The trees were immense, reaching to the sky, their branches intertwined like giant arms. A path, dark and narrow, led into the heart of the forest. This was Humbaba's domain, a place of deep shadows and unseen dangers. A sense of dread hung in the air, a warning to all who dared to enter. Even Gilgamesh felt a shiver of unease, but his resolve remained firm. They stepped into the forest, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and their own footsteps. They walked deeper and deeper, the trees growing thicker, the light fading. Then they heard it, a distant roar like a storm approaching, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. It was Humbaba. The sound filled them with terror, but they pressed on, their hands gripping their weapons. They knew they were close, but the battle they had sought was now upon them. The air grew hotter, a strange, unnatural heat, as if a great fire burned nearby. Suddenly, Humbaba appeared. He was a monstrous figure, huge and terrifying, with a face like a snarling lion and eyes that glowed with malevolent fire. His body was covered in scales, and his roar was deafening. He saw the two intruders, tiny figures in his vast domain, and his fury erupted. He charged at them, a living storm of destruction. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood their ground, their hearts pounding, but their courage held. This was the monster they had come to face, and they would not back down. The battle began. Humbaba attacked first, swinging his massive arms, tearing at the trees around them. Gilgamesh, with his great axe, struck at the monster, but Humbaba's skin was like armor, deflecting the blows. Enkidu, quick and agile, darted around, trying to find a weakness. Humbaba's roars echoed through the forest, a sound of pure terror. Gilgamesh felt his strength beginning to wane, a cold fear creeping into his heart. He looked at Enkidu, and for a moment he thought they might truly fail. Seeing Gilgamesh hesitate, Enkidu cried out, "Do not fear, my friend. Remember your dreams. Remember the strength of Shamash. We are here, and we will not turn back. Strike him, Gilgamesh. Strike him down." Enkidu's words filled Gilgamesh with new courage. He remembered his dreams, the promise of victory. He remembered the god Shamash, who had promised to help them. He raised his axe high, calling upon the power of the sun god. At that moment, the great god Shamash, seeing their struggle from the heavens, sent mighty winds to aid Gilgamesh and Enkidu. 8 fierce winds swept into the cedar forest, swirling around Humbaba, trapping him, blinding him, making him stumble. Humbaba roared in frustration, unable to fight against the unseen forces. This was their chance. Gilgamesh, empowered by Shamash, struck with all his might, his axe biting deep into Humbaba's neck. Enkidu, seeing the monster weakened, joined the attack, striking at Humbaba's legs, bringing the giant to his knees. Humbaba fell, a colossal crash that shook the entire forest. He lay defeated, his monstrous body still. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood over him, panting, their bodies aching, but their hearts filled with triumph. They had done it. They had defeated the fearsome guardian of the cedar forest. Humbaba, in his dying moments, begged for mercy, promising to serve Gilgamesh, to be his slave. Enkidu, remembering Humbaba's cruelty, urged Gilgamesh not to listen, not to show mercy to such a creature. Gilgamesh, after a moment of hesitation, listened to his friend. With a final, powerful blow, they ended Humbaba's life. They then began to cut down the mighty cedar trees, fulfilling their goal. The sound of their axes echoed through the now silent forest. They chose the finest cedars, preparing them to be floated down the river back to Uruk. They had achieved great glory, a feat no other mortal had dared, but their victory came at a cost. The great god Enlil, who had placed Humbaba as guardian, was furious. He saw their act as a great disrespect, a challenge to his authority. He cursed them, promising that their triumph would bring them sorrow and pain. After their great victory, Gilgamesh and Enkidu returned to Uruk, bringing with them the magnificent cedar trees and the head of Humbaba as proof of their triumph. The people of Uruk cheered, celebrating their heroes. Gilgamesh, now truly a beloved king, was filled with pride. He washed himself, put on his finest clothes, and adorned himself with his royal crown. He was a king worthy of admiration, a hero of legend. It was then that the goddess Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, saw Gilgamesh. She was captivated by his beauty, his strength, and his recent triumph. She desired him, wanting him to be her husband. She came to him, her voice sweet, her eyes shining with desire. "Come, Gilgamesh," she said, "be my husband. I will give you riches beyond measure, chariots of lapis lazuli and gold, drawn by mighty lions. You will be a king among kings, and your fame will spread throughout the lands. I will be your queen, and you will be my beloved." But Gilgamesh, filled with his own pride and perhaps a touch of arrogance, scorned her offer. He remembered the fate of Ishtar's previous lovers, how she had used them and then abandoned them, turning them into animals or monsters. He listed them, one by one, reminding her of her cruel past. "What would I gain from being your husband?" Gilgamesh asked, his voice sharp. "You are like a flimsy door that keeps out neither wind nor storm. You are like a shoe that bites its owner's foot. You have loved Tammuz, and you condemned him to the underworld. You loved the shepherd, and you turned him into a wolf. You loved the gardener, and you turned him into a bird. No, Ishtar, I will not be your husband. I know your ways." Ishtar's face twisted with fury. Her sweet words turned to bitter curses. To be rejected, and so scornfully, by a mere mortal. Her pride was deeply wounded. She stormed back to the heavens, weeping and raging before her father, Anu, the god of the sky, and her mother, Antu. She demanded vengeance. "Father," she cried, "Gilgamesh has insulted me. He has shamed me. Send the bull of heaven to Uruk. Let it bring destruction upon him and his city. If you do not, I will break down the gates of the underworld and raise the dead to devour the living." Anu hesitated. He knew the bull of heaven was a creature of immense power, capable of causing great famine and destruction. He tried to reason with Ishtar, but her rage was too great. She threatened to unleash chaos upon the world if her demand was not met. Finally, Anu relented. He gave Ishtar the reins to the bull of heaven, warning her of the terrible consequences. He told her that if the bull was unleashed, it would bring 7 years of famine upon Uruk. Ishtar, still burning with anger, promised to store enough grain for the people, though her true intention was only revenge. Ishtar unleashed the bull of heaven upon Uruk. The monstrous creature descended from the sky, its roar shaking the foundations of the city. With every breath it snorted fire, and with every stamp of its hoof, the earth cracked open, swallowing hundreds of people. The bull of heaven rampaged through the streets, destroying buildings, trampling citizens, causing chaos and death wherever it went. The people screamed in terror, fleeing for their lives, but there was nowhere to hide from the divine beast. Uruk, once a city of celebration, became a scene of horror. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, hearing the cries of their people, rushed to confront the monster. They saw the devastation, the fear in the eyes of the citizens, and their hearts filled with determination. They would not let this creature destroy their city, their home. They stood together, ready to face the divine beast, just as they had faced Humbaba. This was a different kind of challenge, a creature sent by the gods, but their courage was unwavering. The bull of heaven charged at them, its horns sharp, its eyes blazing with divine fury. Gilgamesh and Enkidu met its charge head-on. Gilgamesh, with his immense strength, grabbed the bull by its horns, trying to wrestle it down. The bull thrashed and struggled, its power immense. Enkidu, agile and quick, leaped onto the bull's back, trying to hold it still, to find a weak spot. It was a brutal fight, the two heroes against a creature of divine power. The bull roared, shaking the city, but Gilgamesh and Enkidu held firm. Enkidu, with his knowledge of animals and his incredible strength, found the bull's weakness. He saw a spot behind its neck, a place where the skin was not as thick. He cried out to Gilgamesh, "Strike here, my friend. This is its weakness." Gilgamesh, seeing the opening, plunged his sword deep into the bull's neck. The mighty creature bellowed in pain. Its legs buckled, and it crashed to the ground, dead. The earth trembled one last time as the great bull of heaven fell. The people of Uruk, who had been hiding in terror, slowly emerged, their faces filled with awe and relief. Their heroes had saved them again. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood over the fallen beast, victorious once more, but their defiance had not gone unnoticed in the heavens. Ishtar, watching from above, shrieked in rage and despair. Her plan for revenge had failed, and her bull of heaven was dead. She stood on the walls of Uruk, cursing Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Enkidu, still filled with the heat of battle and a defiant spirit, tore off the bull's right thigh. With a powerful throw, he hurled it at Ishtar, the goddess who had brought such destruction upon his city. "If I could," he shouted, "I would do this to you too." His act was a final insult, a clear message that they feared neither her nor her divine power. Gilgamesh and Enkidu then cut out the bull's heart, offering it to the god Shamash, their protector, as a sign of gratitude. They celebrated their victory, feasting and rejoicing, unaware of the terrible fate that awaited them. In the heavens, the great gods held a council. Anu, Enlil, Ea, and Shamash gathered to discuss the actions of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. They had killed Humbaba, the guardian of the cedar forest, and now they had slain the bull of heaven, a creature sent by the gods themselves. This defiance could not go unpunished. the gods debated their fate. Shamash, who had helped them, argued for their lives, saying they had acted with his blessing. But Enlil, still furious over the death of Humbaba, demanded justice. One of them must die, Enlil declared. Either Gilgamesh or Enkidu must pay the price for their insolence. The gods made their decision. It was decreed that Enkidu, the wild man who had become Gilgamesh's friend, would be the one to die. He was the one who had helped Gilgamesh in his defiance, the one who had thrown the bull's thigh at Ishtar. He was the one who would pay the ultimate price. Enkidu, back in Uruk, suddenly felt a terrible sickness come upon him. His body grew weak. A fever burned within him, and he could no longer stand. He knew, deep in his heart, that this was the gods' punishment, the consequence of their great deeds. Gilgamesh stayed by Enkidu's side, his heart filled with dread. He watched his friend suffer, his strong body wasting away. Enkidu tossed and turned, his dreams filled with visions of the underworld, of shadowy figures and dust. He cursed the hunter who had found him, and Shamhat, who had brought him to civilization. For if he had remained in the wild, he would not be facing this fate. But then, the god Shamhash spoke to him in a dream, reminding him of the good things he had gained, his friendship with Gilgamesh, his fame, his place in Uruk. Enkidu regretted his curses and found some peace. For 12 days, Enkidu lay dying. Gilgamesh never left his side, holding his hand, speaking words of comfort, his own heart breaking with every shallow breath his friend took. He prayed to the gods, begging them to spare Enkidu, offering sacrifices, anything to save his beloved companion. But the gods' decree was final. Enkidu grew weaker and weaker, his voice fading, his eyes losing their light. Gilgamesh watched, helpless, as the life slowly drained from his friend. Then, on the 12th day, Enkidu breathed his last. His hand went limp in Gilgamesh's grasp. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. Enkidu, the wild man, the loyal friend, was gone. Gilgamesh let out a cry of anguish, a sound of pure despair that echoed through the palace. He knelt beside his friend's body, his heart shattered. He wept bitter tears, tearing at his clothes, pulling out his hair. He could not believe it. His strong, brave Enkidu, who had faced monsters and gods with him, was dead. Gilgamesh held Enkidu's body for a long time, refusing to let go, refusing to accept that his friend was truly gone. He covered Enkidu's face with a cloth, but then he pulled it back, staring at the still features, hoping for a sign of life. He grieved for 6 days and 7 nights, his sorrow a heavy cloak around him. He spoke to Enkidu's lifeless body, recounting their adventures, their shared laughter, their unbreakable bond. He remembered their first meeting, the fierce battle that had turned into the deepest friendship. The death of Enkidu shattered Gilgamesh. The mighty king, who had faced monsters and gods, now faced something far more terrifying, the cold, stark reality of his own mortality. If Enkidu, so strong and brave, could die, then so could Gilgamesh. The fear of death, a fear he had never known before, now gripped his heart with an icy hand. He saw his own future, a future where he too would become dust, just like his friend. The thought filled him with a terror so profound that it drove him to desperate measures. He would not accept this fate. He would not die. He would find a way to escape the clutches of death, to live forever. And so Gilgamesh, the mighty king, began a new quest, a quest for immortality, a journey into the unknown, driven by grief and a desperate hope. The world, once so vibrant and full of adventure, now seemed a bleak and terrifying place to Gilgamesh. The death of his beloved friend Enkidu had awakened a fear that gnawed at his very soul, the fear of his own death. For 6 days and 7 nights, Gilgamesh wept over Enkidu's body, refusing to let him be buried. He watched his friend's face, hoping for a flicker of life, a breath, a sign that it was all a terrible dream. He spoke to the lifeless form, recounting their adventures, their laughter, their battles, the unbreakable bond they shared. He could not imagine a world without Enkidu by his side. The silence in the palace was heavy, broken only by Gilgamesh's heartbroken cries. He remembered Enkidu's strength, his bravery, his wild spirit. Enkidu had been his equal, his mirror, the only one who truly understood him. And now Enkidu was gone, turned to dust, a silent, unmoving form. If Enkidu, who was so strong, who had faced Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven, could die, then what hope was there for Gilgamesh himself? He too was mortal. He too would one day breathe his last, his mighty body turning to clay. The thought was a cold, sharp knife twisting in his heart. He saw his own future, a future of darkness, of nothingness, a future he could not, would not accept. A terrible realization dawned on him. All his fame, all his strength, all his grand buildings in Uruk meant nothing if he was destined to die. The very idea of his own end filled him with a terror more profound than any monster he had ever faced. This was a foe he could not defeat with a sword, a challenge he could not overcome with brute force. Death was inevitable, a shadow that followed all mortals, but Gilgamesh, with his 2/3 divine blood, with his restless, unyielding spirit, refused to surrender to this fate. He would fight death itself. He heard whispers, old stories passed down through generations, about a man named Utnapishtim. This Utnapishtim was a survivor of a great flood, a man whom the gods had granted eternal life. He lived far away, at the mouth of the rivers, in a distant land, a place where the sun rose and set, a place beyond the known world. Gilgamesh clung to this whisper of hope. If one man could escape death, then perhaps he could too. He would find Utnapishtim. He would learn the secret of everlasting life. He would not die. With this desperate hope burning in his heart, Gilgamesh made a drastic change. He stripped off his royal robes, his fine clothes, and his gleaming armor. He clothed himself in rough animal skins, a humble garment that reflected his new desperate state. His hair became matted, his face gaunt with grief and determination. He was no longer the proud king of Uruk. He was a desperate wanderer, a man driven by a singular, consuming fear. He left the city, leaving behind his throne, his people, and the comfort of his palace. He stepped into the vast, unknown wilderness, alone, his eyes fixed on a distant, impossible goal. His journey was long and perilous. He walked through scorching deserts, where the sun beat down relentlessly, baking the earth. The sand stretched endlessly in every direction, shimmering in the heat, offering no shade, no water. His throat was parched, his lips cracked. He felt the gnawing pangs of hunger, a constant companion on his lonely path. He had once been a king, waited on hand and foot, but now he was just a man, struggling for survival against the harshness of the land. He hunted for food, ate wild berries, and drank from muddy pools, a far cry from the feasts of Uruk. He crossed jagged mountains, their peaks scraping the sky, their slopes treacherous and steep. The wind howled through the passes, a mournful sound that echoed his own despair. He climbed over sharp rocks, his feet bleeding, his body aching with every step. He faced wild beasts, fierce lions and powerful bears, creatures that would have once been a mere challenge. Now he fought them with a desperate ferocity, his life depending on every swing of his axe, every thrust of his knife. He killed them, not for glory, but for survival, for their meat and their skins. He was becoming as wild as Enkidu had once been, stripped bare of his royal polish, driven by instinct and a singular obsession. He traveled for many days and nights, his sense of time blurring into a relentless march. His body grew thin, his face haggard, his eyes haunted by grief and the fear of death. He was a shadow of his former self, a king transformed into a ragged wanderer. Yet he pressed on, his will unbroken. The image of Enkidu's still face and the terrifying thought of his own mortality pushed him forward, one weary step after another. He would not rest, he would not stop, until he found Utnapishtim. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he reached the twin peaks of Mashu. These were colossal mountains, rising impossibly high, their summits touching the very edge of the sky. This was the place where the sun rose and set, the gateway to the underworld, a place guarded by fearsome beings. As he approached, he saw them, the scorpion men. Their upper bodies were human, but from the waist down, they were scorpions, massive and terrifying, their tails curved over their heads, their stingers dripping with venom. Their eyes glowed with a terrifying light, and their presence radiated death. Gilgamesh, despite his desperation, felt a shiver of fear. These were not mere monsters. They were guardians of the divine, beings of immense power. He bowed low, showing respect, and explained his desperate quest. He told them of Enkidu's death, of his own fear, and his burning desire to find Utnapishtim, the Scorpion Man. His voice like thunder spoke to him. "No mortal has ever passed through these gates, Gilgamesh," he warned. "The path through the mountain is 12 leagues of utter darkness. No light, no sound, only the blackness of the earth. You will never survive. Turn back, Gilgamesh. Accept your fate." But Gilgamesh, his voice filled with a desperate plea, refused. "I have faced death before," he declared, "and I will face it again. I will not turn back. My heart is set on finding Utnapishtim. I must know the secret of life. Let me pass." The Scorpion Man, seeing the unyielding determination in Gilgamesh's eyes, and perhaps sensing the divine blood within him, finally relented. "Go then, Gilgamesh," he said, "but know that you walk towards a fate no mortal has ever escaped. May the god Shamash, who travels this path daily, guide you." Gilgamesh stepped through the mighty gate into the heart of the mountain. The darkness was absolute, a thick, suffocating blanket that swallowed all light, all sound. He could see nothing, not his own hand before his face. He walked blindly, stumbling over unseen obstacles, his hands outstretched, feeling his way forward. The air was heavy, cold and still. He felt utterly alone, swallowed by the earth. Fear, a primal, ancient fear, gnawed at him. He thought of Enkidu, of the darkness of the grave, and his resolve hardened. He would not give in. He walked for what felt like an eternity, league after league, through the suffocating blackness. Each step was a struggle, each breath a conscious effort. He counted the leagues, marking his progress in the endless night. 1 league, 2 leagues, 3. The darkness pressed in on him, threatening to crush his spirit, to drive him mad. He imagined monsters lurking in the shadows, unseen horrors waiting to pounce. But he pushed these thoughts away, focusing only on the distant light, the promise of the rising sun. After 11 leagues, a faint glimmer appeared in the distance, a tiny speck of light like a star in the blackest night. Gilgamesh's heart leaped with renewed hope. He stumbled forward, driven by the sight of that precious light. The glimmer grew, slowly, steadily, until it became a radiant glow. He pushed through the last league, his body aching, his mind reeling from the ordeal. And then he emerged. He stepped out of the darkness and into a world of breathtaking beauty. It was a garden, but unlike any garden he had ever seen. The trees were not made of wood, but of precious jewels. Their leaves were made of lapis lazuli. Their fruits were carnelian, sparkling rubies, and gleaming emeralds. The ground was covered in pearls, and the air was filled with a soft, ethereal light. It was the garden of the gods, a place of unimaginable splendor, a paradise hidden at the end of the world. Gilgamesh, weary and dust-covered, stood in awe, his eyes taking in the dazzling sight. He walked through the jeweled garden, his senses overwhelmed by its beauty. He saw a woman sitting by the sea, a tavern keeper named Sijori. She was beautiful, her face serene, her movements graceful. She looked at Gilgamesh, seeing his wild appearance, his haggard face, his animal skins, and her heart filled with fear. She thought he was a wild man, a dangerous beast, and she quickly locked the door of her tavern, hiding herself from him. Gilgamesh, seeing her fear, called out to her, his voice rough from his long journey. He told her who he was, Gilgamesh, King of Uruk, and of his desperate quest. He spoke of Enkidu's death and his own terror of mortality. "I have come all this way, through darkness and danger, to find Utnapishtim," he pleaded. "Tell me, wise Sijori, how can I reach him? How can I find the secret of everlasting life?" Sijori, hearing his story and seeing his profound sorrow, felt pity for him. She opened her door and listened, but her words were not what he hoped for. "Gilgamesh," she said gently, Why do you chase after immortality? The life you seek, you will never find. When the gods created mankind, they appointed death for mankind and kept life in their own hands. Fill your belly with good food, Gilgamesh. Dance and make music, day and night. Let your clothes be clean. Wash your head and bathe in water. Look at the little hand of the child who holds your hand, and let your wife delight in your embrace, for this is the task of mankind. Her words were wise, a plea for him to accept his human fate and find joy in the simple pleasures of life. But Gilgamesh, consumed by his fear, could not accept them. "How can I rest?" he cried. "How can I be still? My friend Enkidu, whom I loved, has turned to clay, and I too shall die and be like him. I must find Utnapishtim. Tell me, Siduri, how do I cross the waters of death?" Siduri sighed, seeing his unyielding resolve. "Gilgamesh," she said, "no mortal has ever crossed those waters. Only Urshanabi, the ferryman of Utnapishtim, can navigate them, and even he must be careful, for the waters of death are deadly. No touch, no drop, can touch your skin, or you will surely die." She then pointed him towards the direction where he might find Urshanabi, the ferryman. Gilgamesh, his hope rekindled, set off once more. He soon found Urshanabi, the ferryman, standing by his boat. But Urshanabi was not alone. With him were strange, stone-like beings, the stone things, who somehow helped him navigate the deadly waters. Gilgamesh, still filled with a wild fury from his journey and his grief, and perhaps misunderstanding their purpose, attacked them. He struck them down, shattering them into pieces. This was a grave mistake, for the stone things were essential for the safe crossing of the waters of death. Urshanabi, seeing his stone things destroyed, was horrified. "What have you done, Gilgamesh?" he cried. "You have destroyed the very things that allow me to cross the waters of death. Now how will we reach Utnapishtim?" Gilgamesh, realizing his error, hung his head in shame. He had been so consumed by his quest that he had acted recklessly. But Gilgamesh was also resourceful. "Tell me what to do, Urshanabi," he pleaded. "I will do anything to reach Utnapishtim." Urshanabi, after a moment of thought, instructed him. "Go into the forest, Gilgamesh. Cut down 300 poles, each 60 cubits long. Make them strong, make them straight, and bring them back to me. These will be our new stone things, our way across the deadly waters." Gilgamesh, without hesitation, went to the forest. He worked tirelessly, his axe ringing through the trees. He cut down 300 mighty poles, stripping them of their bark, sharpening their ends. His hands were blistered, his muscles ached, but he kept working, driven by his desperate hope. He dragged the heavy poles back to the shore, piling them beside Urshanabi's boat. With the poles ready, Urshanabi explained the plan. "When we cross the waters of death, Gilgamesh, you must use these poles. You will push the boat forward with one pole, and as soon as it touches the water, you must discard it. Do not let your hand touch the deadly water, not even for a moment. If a single drop touches you, you will die. We will use a new pole for each push until we reach the other side." Gilgamesh nodded, understanding the gravity of the task. He stepped into the boat with Urshanabi. The ferryman pushed off from the shore, and they entered the terrifying waters of death. The water was dark and still, a silent, deadly expanse. Gilgamesh took the first pole, plunged it into the water, and pushed with all his might. The boat glided forward. As soon as the pole touched the water, he quickly released it, letting it float away, then grabbed a new one. He worked relentlessly, pole after pole, pushing the boat forward, his eyes fixed on the distant shore, on the faint outline of Utnapishtim's dwelling. His arms burned, his body screamed in protest, but he dared not stop, dared not falter. Each discarded pole was a step closer to his goal, a defiance of the death that lay in the water around him. He used up pole after pole, the pile dwindling, his strength waning. The journey was long, the silence broken only by the splash of the poles and the rhythmic creak of the boat. Finally, with the last pole, Gilgamesh pushed the boat towards the shore. His body was exhausted, his spirit stretched to its limits, but he had done it. They had crossed the waters of death. He stumbled out of the boat, his legs trembling, and looked up. Before him, in a garden of shimmering light, sat an old man, his face ancient and wise, his eyes holding the wisdom of ages. This was Utnapishtim, the faraway, the immortal one. Gilgamesh, ragged and desperate, fell to his knees before Utnapishtim. He had endured unimaginable hardships, faced terrifying dangers, and journeyed to the very edge of the world, all for this moment. He looked at the ancient man, his heart filled with a desperate plea. He had come so far, suffered so much, all to ask one question: how could he escape death? Would Utnapishtim, the wise one, truly reveal his secret? The answer would determine Gilgamesh's fate, and perhaps the fate of all humanity. There, on the distant shore, sat Utnapishtim, the Ancient One, the only human to escape the clutches of death. Gilgamesh, weary and desperate, fell to his knees before him. His clothes were ragged, his body thin, and his face was etched with the pain of his long journey and the grief for his lost friend. He poured out his heart, his voice hoarse, begging for the secret to everlasting life. He spoke of Enkidu, of his death, and of the crushing fear that now lived in his own heart. "Tell me, Utnapishtim," he pleaded, "how did you find eternal life? How can I escape the fate that awaits all mortals?" Utnapishtim looked at Gilgamesh with eyes that had seen countless ages. He was an old man, but his presence was calm and wise, like a deep, still pool of water. He did not immediately answer Gilgamesh's desperate plea. Instead, he looked at the king. Seeing the raw fear and exhaustion in his eyes, he saw a man who had faced the world's greatest dangers, only to be brought low by the simple truth of being mortal. Utnapishtim spoke, his voice gentle but firm, questioning Gilgamesh's desperate chase. "Gilgamesh," he said, "why do you grieve so much? Why do you run from the fate that is given to all mankind? All things that are built, all things that are made, must one day fall apart. The river rises and floods, then it goes down. The dragonfly leaves its shell, and its face is seen by the sun. There is no permanence. Death is part of life." Utnapishtim continued, speaking of the cycle of life and death, how all humans are destined to return to the earth. He reminded Gilgamesh that even the greatest heroes, the strongest kings, eventually face their end. He spoke of the gods who had decided the fate of mankind, giving them life, but also appointing death. He asked Gilgamesh if he could build a house that would stand forever, or if he could keep a river from flooding. He was trying to make Gilgamesh understand that some things are beyond human control, that death is a natural part of existence, just like birth. But Gilgamesh, still consumed by his terror, could not accept these words of wisdom. He interrupted Utnapishtim, his voice filled with urgency. "You are just like me, Utnapishtim," he cried. "You are a man just as I am. How did you come to sit here, at the end of the world, untouched by death? Tell me your secret. Do not hide it from me. I have faced so much to reach you. I deserve to know." Utnapishtim looked at the desperate king and finally decided to tell his story, the incredible tale of how he and his wife became the only mortals to receive the gift of eternal life. He began, his voice soft, recounting a time long, long ago, when the world was young and the gods lived closer to mankind. Long ago, Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim began. The great gods gathered in council. There was Anu, the god of the sky, Enlil, the god of the wind and storms, Ninurta, the god of war, and Ennugi, the god of canals. And with them was Ea, the wise god of water and wisdom. These great gods looked down upon the earth, and they saw that mankind had become too numerous, too loud. Their noise rose to the heavens, disturbing the gods' peace. Enlil, in particular, was angry. He declared that mankind had become too much of a burden, and he decided to destroy them all with a great flood. The gods swore an oath. Utnapishtim continued that they would keep this plan a secret. No mortal was to know, so that no one could escape. But Ea, the wise god, had a soft spot for humanity. He had created us, and he did not want to see us all perish. He could not break his oath directly by telling a human, but he found a way. "I lived in the city of Shuruppak, a devout man, a worshipper of Ea. One night, as I lay sleeping, Ea came to me in a dream. He spoke not to me directly, but to the wall of my house, as if speaking to the reeds that made up its structure. He said, "O reed house, reed wall, listen to me, man of Shuruppak, son of Ubaratutu. Tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions, save your life. Give up your goods and save your soul alive. Make a boat, and its measurements shall be exact. Its length shall be equal to its width. Cover it over like the Apsu, the great deep waters." O Redan gave me the precise instructions for building the boat. Its size, its shape, how many decks it should have, how it should be sealed with pitch and bitumen. I understood the dream, Utnapishtim said, his eyes distant, remembering the terror of that time. I knew that the gods were planning a great flood. I was afraid, but I trusted Ea. I went to the elders of Shuruppak and told them that the god Enlil was angry with me, and that I had to leave the city and build a boat to sail away. I told them that Ea would send them a rain of food and abundance if I left. They believed me, and they helped me. All the craftsmen, the carpenters, the builders, the pitchmakers came to help. We worked day and night, building the great boat. It was a massive vessel, 7 decks high, with many compartments, like a giant cube. We sealed it with pitch, inside and out, making it watertight. When the boat was finished, Utnapishtim continued, I brought into it all my family, my relatives, and the craftsmen who had helped me build it. I brought all kinds of animals, wild beasts of the field and tame beasts of the plain. 2 by 2, I loaded all my gold, silver, and precious stones onto the boat. I brought all the seeds of life, all the plants and grains, so that life could begin anew after the flood. I slaughtered oxen and sheep for a feast, and I poured out wine and oil, making offerings to the gods, hoping for their mercy. Then I closed the door, sealing us inside. Then came the storm, Utnapishtim said, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if he could still hear the roar of the winds and the crashing of the waves. It began at dawn. A black cloud rose from the horizon, and within it, the god Adad, the storm god, thundered. Shulat and Hanish, the heralds of the storm, went over mountain and plain. Erekol tore out the mooring posts. Ninurta, the god of war, came, and the dikes of the earth were shattered. The Anunnaki, the great gods of the underworld, raised their torches, setting the land ablaze with their light. The very light of the sun turned to darkness. The storm raged, a terrifying hurricane that swept over the earth. The waters rose higher and higher, covering the mountains, swallowing the cities. No one could see anyone else. The flood was so vast, so dark. Even the gods in heaven were terrified, Utnapishtim recounted, his voice filled with the awe and fear of that memory. They fled to the highest heaven, to the dwelling place of Anu, and huddled there trembling like frightened dogs. Ishtar, the great goddess, cried out in anguish, lamenting the destruction of her people. She wept for humanity, for the children who were now turning to clay. The other gods wept with her, their faces streaked with tears. For 6 days and 6 nights, the storm raged. The flood waters covered the earth, destroying everything. All mankind was turned to mud. On the 7th day, Utnapishtim said, the storm began to calm. The hurricane subsided. The floodwaters began to recede. I opened a window on the boat, and a faint light shone upon my face. I looked out, and all was silence. The land was flat, like a roof. All mankind had returned to clay. I sat down and wept, tears streaming down my face, for all that had been lost. I looked for a shore, for a sign of land, but there was only water, stretching endlessly in every direction. Then, after many more days, my boat came to rest on the top of Mount Nisa. Utnapishtim said, it held fast and did not budge. For 6 more days it stayed there, stuck on the mountain. On the 7th day, I sent out a dove. It flew away, but found no resting place, so it returned to the boat. Then I sent out a swallow. It flew away, but also found no resting place, and returned. Finally, I sent out a raven. The raven flew off, saw that the waters had receded, and it ate. It walked about, it cawed, and it did not return. I knew then that the waters had truly gone down. I then opened the boat completely, Utnapishtim continued, and stepped out onto the mountain. I prepared a sacrifice for the gods. I set up 7 and 7 cult vessels, and beneath them I piled cedar wood and myrtle. I poured out a libation, and the gods, drawn by the sweet smell of the sacrifice, gathered like flies around the offering. Ishtar came, wearing her necklace of lapis lazuli, which she had made as a reminder of the flood. She swore that she would never forget this terrible time, and that she would remember the necklace as a sign of her promise. But then Enlil appeared. Utnapishtim said, his voice growing stern. He was furious. He saw that a human had survived, that his plan to destroy mankind had been thwarted. Has any mortal escaped? He roared. No man was to survive the destruction. Ninurta and Ea then spoke to him. Ea, the wise god, stood up to Enlil. "O Enlil," Ea said, "you are the wisest of the gods, the bravest of them all. How could you bring such a flood without thought? You should have punished the wicked, but spared the righteous. You should have sent a lion to thin mankind, or a wolf, or a famine, or a plague, but not a flood that destroys all." Ea then confessed that he had warned me, not directly, but through a dream. Enlil, hearing Ea's words, and perhaps seeing the sorrow in the other gods' faces, finally relented. Utnapishtim said. He stepped onto the boat, took my hand, and brought me and my wife out. He made us kneel before him. Then he touched our foreheads and blessed us. Before this, Enlil declared, Utnapishtim was a mortal man, but now Utnapishtim and his wife shall be like us, the gods. He shall dwell far away, at the mouth of the rivers, where the sun rises and sets, at the end of the world. And so Gilgamesh, that is how I came to be here, granted eternal life by the gods themselves. Utnapishtim finished his story, and a silence fell over the jeweled garden. Gilgamesh listened, his heart filled with a mix of awe and despair. The story was incredible, but it also showed him how impossible his own quest was. Utnapishtim had gained immortality through a unique divine intervention, not through any effort of his own. It was a gift, not a secret to be learned. Utnapishtim then looked at Gilgamesh, his gaze piercing. "Now Gilgamesh," he said, "if you wish for eternal life, who among the gods will gather for you the assembly by which you may find that life you search for? Can you even escape sleep, which is a small part of death? For 6 days and 7 nights you have been on this journey, driven by fear. Now try to conquer sleep. Stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, and then perhaps you will be worthy of immortality." Gilgamesh, though weary, felt a surge of determination. This was a test he could understand, a challenge of his own will and strength. He sat down, determined to stay awake. He would conquer sleep. He would prove himself worthy. He would not close his eyes, not for a moment. He would show Utnapishtim that he was different, that he deserved to escape death. But as soon as he sat down, exhaustion, heavy and irresistible, washed over him. His eyelids grew heavy. His head began to nod. He fought against it, trying to keep his eyes open, trying to focus on Utnapishtim's face. But the weariness of his long journey, the emotional toll of Enkidu's death, and the sheer effort of his quest had finally caught up to him. Before he knew it, his head slumped forward, and he fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Utnapishtim watched him, a gentle, knowing smile on his ancient face. He turned to his wife. "Look at him," he said softly. "The man who seeks eternal life cannot even conquer sleep. He will try to deny that he slept, of course." Utnapishtim's wife, a kind woman, felt pity for Gilgamesh. "Let us bake a loaf of bread for him for each day he sleeps," she suggested. "Place them beside him, and when he wakes, he will see the proof of his slumber." So Utnapishtim's wife baked a loaf of bread each day that Gilgamesh slept. She placed them beside him, one by one. The first loaf was fresh and soft. The second was a little harder. The third was dry. The fourth was stale. The fifth was moldy. The sixth was hard as a rock. The seventh was covered in dust. Each loaf marked a day of Gilgamesh's deep sleep, a silent record of his failure. After 6 days and 7 nights, Utnapishtim touched Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh awoke with a start, refreshed and confused. He looked around, blinking, and then declared, "I have not slept. I have barely closed my eyes. I have conquered sleep, Utnapishtim. Now, tell me the secret of eternal life." Utnapishtim smiled sadly. "Gilgamesh," he said, "count the loaves of bread beside you. Look at their condition." Gilgamesh looked down and saw the 7 loaves, each in a different state of decay, from fresh to dusty and moldy. He saw the undeniable proof of his long sleep, the evidence of his human weakness. His face fell. He had failed the test. He had not conquered sleep, and therefore he could not conquer death. The bitter truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. His quest, his desperate hope, had been in vain. He was, after all, just a mortal man. Utnapishtim, seeing Gilgamesh's despair, felt a pang of compassion. He knew the pain of loss, the fear of death. He had seen Gilgamesh's immense effort, his incredible journey. "Gilgamesh," he said, "though you have failed this test, I will not send you away empty-handed. There is a plant, a thorny plant, that grows at the bottom of the sea. It is called the old man becomes young again. If you can find it, if you can bring it back, it will not grant you eternal life, but it will restore your youth. It will make you young again, fresh and strong, as you were in your prime." A flicker of hope, small but precious, ignited in Gilgamesh's heart. Not immortality, but youth, a chance to live his life again, with renewed vigor. It was not the ultimate prize he had sought, but it was something, a gift from the Ancient One. He looked at Utnapishtim, his eyes filled with a new kind of determination. He would find this plant. He would bring it back to Uruk. The road back was long, and fate had one more cruel twist in store for the weary king. But for now, there was a new purpose, a new destination. With the magical plant clutched in his hand, Gilgamesh began the long journey home. The promise of renewed youth, if not immortality, filled him with a fragile hope. It was not the eternal life he had desperately sought, but it was a precious gift, a chance to be strong and vibrant once more. He had failed the test of sleep. He had learned the bitter truth of his mortality. But Utnapishtim, in his wisdom and compassion, had offered him this second chance. Gilgamesh felt a new purpose, a different kind of hope, as he turned his back on the distant land of Utnapishtim. Urshanabi, the ferryman, was with him. Together they navigated the treacherous waters of death once more. Gilgamesh carefully using the poles, his hands blistered, but his spirit lighter than when he had arrived. The journey was still long and hard, but the thought of returning to Uruk, of sharing this miraculous plant with his people, perhaps even with the elders, gave him strength. He imagined himself young again, ruling his city with renewed vigor, a king who had faced death and returned with a secret to prolong life. The sun shone brighter on their path, and the air seemed to hum with a quiet promise. They traveled for many days, retracing the long and dangerous path back to Uruk. They passed through the jeweled garden, its sparkling beauty a stark contrast to the harsh lands that lay ahead. They journeyed through the dark passage of the twin peaks of Marshu, but this time Gilgamesh felt less fear. He had faced the darkness and emerged. His focus was now on the plant, on keeping it safe, on bringing its power back to his city. He carried it carefully, a thorny green thing, wrapped in a cloth, a symbol of his hard-won hope. One evening, after a long day of travel, they came to a cool spring. The water was clear and inviting, a welcome sight after the dusty roads. Gilgamesh, feeling tired and wanting to refresh himself before continuing their journey, decided to bathe. He carefully placed the precious plant on the ground, beside his clothes, confident it would be safe. He stepped into the cool water, letting it wash away the dust and weariness of the road. He felt a moment of peace, a rare calm after so much struggle and sorrow. As he bathed, a snake, drawn by the sweet scent of the plant, slithered silently from the bushes. It saw the thorny green thing lying on the ground, its magical essence calling to the creature. Quicker than a blink, the snake snatched the plant. Gilgamesh, still in the water, looked up just in time to see the snake slither away, its skin shedding as it disappeared into the undergrowth, a sign that it had instantly gained new youth. Gilgamesh let out a cry of despair, a sound of utter heartbreak. He scrambled out of the water, rushing to the spot where he had left the plant, but it was gone. Only a faint sweet smell lingered in the air. The snake had stolen it. The plant, his last hope for renewed youth, the fruit of his arduous quest, was lost. Just as he had reached out to grasp a new future, it had slipped through his fingers, snatched away by a creature of the earth. He fell to his knees, his body trembling, his face buried in his hands. All his suffering, all his journey, all his desperate hope had been for nothing. He had faced monsters, crossed deadly waters, endured unimaginable hardships, only to lose the prize at the very last moment. The bitter truth, the one Utnapishtim had tried to teach him, crashed down upon him with devastating force. He was mortal. He would die. There was no escape. The fear that had driven him from Uruk, the fear of becoming like Enkidu, was now a certainty. Urshanabi, the ferryman, stood by, watching Gilgamesh's anguish. He knew there was nothing he could say, nothing he could do to ease the king's pain. Gilgamesh wept, long and hard, tears of exhaustion, grief, and profound disappointment. He had come to the end of his quest, and it had ended in failure. The dream of cheating death, even for a little while, was shattered. But as the tears slowly stopped, a different kind of calm began to settle over Gilgamesh. The raw anguish began to fade, replaced by a quiet acceptance. He had chased immortality, and he had failed. He had sought to escape death, and death had caught him. But in his journey, he had seen so much, learned so much. He had faced his deepest fears, and he had endured. He had come to the very edge of the world, and back. He was still a man, still mortal, but he was also a changed man. He looked at Urshanabi, his eyes still sad, but now with a flicker of understanding. "Urshanabi," Gilgamesh said, his voice quiet, "let us return to Uruk. My quest is over. I have found no eternal life, no lasting youth, but I have seen the world, and I have learned a great deal." The long walk back to Uruk began, but this time, Gilgamesh walked with a different purpose. He was no longer running from death. He was walking towards life, towards his home, towards his responsibilities. As they approached Uruk, the towering walls of his city rose before him, magnificent and strong. He had built them, or at least he had ordered them built, overseen their construction. He had once seen them as a symbol of his power, a monument to his tyranny, but now he saw them differently. He saw the strength of his city, the enduring legacy of his reign. These walls would stand long after he was gone, protecting his people, a testament to his life, not his death. He led Urshanabi through the city gates, and the people of Uruk looked at him, surprised by his haggard appearance, his simple clothes, but they also saw something new in his eyes, a quiet wisdom, a deep understanding. He was no longer the restless, arrogant king who had left them. He was a man who had faced the greatest truth of all and returned, humbled but wiser. Gilgamesh took Urshanabi to the walls of Uruk. He pointed to their massive foundations, their soaring heights, their strong gates. "Look, Urshanabi," he said, "these are the walls of Uruk. See how their foundations are like bronze. See how their battlements are like copper. Climb upon the wall of Uruk, walk along it, inspect its foundations. Is not its brickwork of burnt brick? Did not the 7 sages lay its foundations?" He spoke with pride, not of his own unending life, but of the enduring strength of his city, of the work that would outlast him. He understood now. True immortality was not about living forever in his own body. It was about what he left behind, the city he had built, the people he had led, the stories of his deeds, and the wisdom he had gained. His fame, his legacy, would live on through the generations, whispered in tales, etched into the very stones of Uruk. He would be remembered not just as a mighty king, but as a wise one, a hero who had faced the ultimate challenge and found a different kind of triumph. Gilgamesh returned to his duties as king, but he was a changed ruler. He was no longer oppressive, no longer restless. He ruled with justice and compassion, guided by the profound lessons he had learned on his journey. He remembered Enkidu, not with bitter grief, but with love and gratitude for the friendship that had changed him forever, that had set him on this path of self-discovery. He understood that the love he had for Enkidu and the lessons learned from his friend's death were more valuable than any magical plant. He commissioned scribes to write down his story, his epic journey, from his tyrannical beginnings to his desperate quest for immortality, his triumphs, his failures, and his ultimate acceptance. This story, etched onto clay tablets, would be his true immortality, a tale that would be read and reread for thousands of years, inspiring future generations. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of a king who learned to be human, became a timeless legend. And so, the story of Gilgamesh, the king who once feared death, became a timeless tale of friendship, adventure, loss, and the enduring power of a life well lived. His quest for personal immortality may have failed, but his legacy, carved into the very walls of Uruk and whispered through the ages, truly lives forever. He found peace, not in escaping death, but in embracing his life, his humanity, and the lasting impact of his deeds. He became a wise and beloved king, remembered not for his endless life, but for the profound journey he undertook and the wisdom he gained. His story reminds us that while our lives may be finite, the mark we leave on the world and the love we share can echo through eternity.